Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone, and especially Principal Ken Gilbert, for hosting tonight and letting us use your fantastic facility. Everyone in the audience, union representatives, and city councilors that are present. And we are ready to start our meeting. Is there approval for the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval.
I second.
Motion has been approved and second to pass the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. So we have 9 comments in our public comment section tonight. We'll be providing a brief summary of these comments.
Chair Onagwa, I've been asked to provide that summary this evening, and so I've got a summary prepared. And I'll be summarizing comments to the board. I'll read the central content from each comment and emphasize that each written comment is sent in full to the board to read and is maintained as a full part of the public record. Some of these are hard to summarize in small measure, and so I'll read some at length. There were 9 total comments with the following themes. 2 around the performance of the interim superintendent, 2 around firing of the previous superintendent, 3 around the upcoming superintendent search, 3 about COVID and response to safety, 3 about cronyism, 5 about loss of staff at the district, 5 about public comment, and 9 about board performance. Summary of the first. In regard to COVID and safety, I'm wondering if the GAPS nurse could be present to offer her thoughts as well. I really learned a lot from her comments from a previous meeting. I think the public would be better informed with her input as well. The policy decisions made by the board can be literally a matter of life and death. Finally, I'm very concerned about the general lack of transparency thus far and very much in favor of face-to-face public comments versus having them read as an aggregate. I would love to hear what the board has to say in response. Second comment. In its various meetings since July 1st, the board has discussed alternatives to following policy BFF. Various board members have referred to public testimony during meetings as yelling and have expressed a preference for more informational and conversational formats. Recent suggestions include having 2 board members attend an informal half-hour session before board meetings at which members of the public would be allowed to speak. These discussions miss a critical point. When the public speaks at a public meeting, those comments become part of the public record and are available for reference along with the rest of the official business done. It is not necessary that board members respond to the speaker at the time the comment is made for that comment to have value to the business of the board. Number 3, I'm completely dissatisfied with your work and actions inside and outside of board meetings. Because of your reckless behavior, the board has initiated a toxic culture within the district and a negative perception of gaps outside the district. It's discouraging that voices like mine, a woman, continue to get discounted or overlooked. While I have little faith in this board, save for Mr. Thompson, this group could work to build trust in the community by, number 1, ensuring the search for a permanent superintendent is nationwide and completely transparent, and number 2, continuing to comply with state mandates for masks and employee vaccination mandates. Comment number 4, board members. At tonight's meeting, I suspect you will take a great effort to pat yourselves on your hand-selected interim superintendent on the back for a flawless first week back to school. And while that pre-coordination with Marcia Herndon was a good thing that did in fact benefit the district, what you are overlooking is that you are benefiting from the lessons learned last year. Kudos to Rob Saxton for his ability to monopolize on Melissa Goff's lessons learned, and I hope at least one of you will take a moment to recognize her accomplishment. You will view this as Mr. Saxton's great doing because you fail to recognize your own misogyny. And your failure to do this is going to continue to cost you, as it has once again with the loss of another valuable leader among your district staff last week. It is evident to me in the way I've heard you speak about the last superintendent, your value of women is less than it is of men, and I would ask why when you're here in this position which is so heavily skews female. Call upon your better angels because we are watching and we are disappointed. We find your leadership sorely lacking. Number 5, public comment. GAP's School Board, it's time for Nyquist, Oganagua, Morris, and Wilson to resign. GAPS is losing more and more of its best employees as a direct result of the way the board has conducted itself. The dishonesty, lack of transparency, and misogyny are destroying our school district. It will take years to repair the damage you have caused. Resign now. Number 6 comment. Last July, the decision of just 3 individuals to fire Superintendent Melissa Goff cost the district taxpayers $400,000. The 3 board members offered no explanation of how this expenditure would improve education for Albany students. More recently, in a televised KEZI 9 news interview, the board chair passed on his opportunity to support and explain the firing. In order for taxpayers to judge if they are getting their money's worth, the board must certainly explain their decision. If these 4 men made these decisions in good conscience and are proud of them, there is no reason for them not to be forthcoming and explain themselves. Comment number 7. I'm writing to bring your attention to the answers Interim Superintendent Saxton provided at the August 31st Parent Forum to this question and ask you for your answer. How will the community be able to engage in the superintendent search and hire process? Provided below is a transcription of the answer to this question in the English forum and the answer provided in the Spanish forum. The video recording timestamps for those responses are also included. The 2 answers given to the same question are substantively different. The English forum audience was told the process would enlist the services of a consulting firm. The Spanish forum audience was told that the board will do whatever we need to meet with the broader community, including meetings in Spanish, and that the board would be asking for parents and community members to volunteer to be part of the applicant file screening process. Given the lack of transparency in the dismissal of former Superintendent Goff and the lack of community participation in the hire of Interim Superintendent Saxton, your constituents deserve an answer to this important question that is clear and consistent. I urge you to adopt a process for the search and hire that prioritizes community engagement, transparency, and equity. For the future health and well-being of our district, it is imperative that you devote sufficient time to meaningfully and constructively incorporate all voices in the decision. Please address this issue as soon as possible so that your constituents can participate and engage with this body's important work. Public comment 8, GAPS board members. I am concerned about the culture that the board is creating in the Greater Albany Public Schools. There have been several recent resignations from high-level administrators who left the district because of a lack of faith in the leadership of the board. It appears that cronyism has placed several men in positions without an appropriate and transparent hiring process, which would have allowed others to apply for these jobs. These recent events cause great concern that they will set a precedent for the upcoming search for a permanent superintendent. In addition, the board must remember their stance of not allowing comments from the public during their meetings. As most of you do not appear to have much experience or expertise in public education, you need to be open to the input from your constituents, which means everyone in the community, not just those whose votes you were able to procure. We really do not trust that all of you actually read the comments and are submitted but not spoken aloud. It seems that there is an unusually large number of unfilled positions within the district as we begin a new school year. I ask that the board reflect on whether or not their actions might be a cause for this situation. And finally, number 9, GAPS school board members. I watched in amazement as you blunder your way to ever worse school district mismanagement. As a parent and a long observer and participant in public school district workings, I cannot believe that you actually have the best interest of students, faculty, and staff foremost in mind when making the moves you have recently. Stop removing qualified people who know vastly more about their positions than you do. Stop minimizing the safety of the health of all during this pandemic. We are experiencing another surge. You should be seeking maximum protections. Stop hiring your buddies. The board hires the superintendent. The superintendent oversees all remaining hiring. That is one of your key roles, their key roles, not yours. Allow more public comment, not less.
Superintendent. That's going to move us to Section E, Board Business, and E1. That is actually, we're going to talk about public comment tonight, and Vice Chair Morse is going to take that.
Okay, public comment's really important to me. This is about school board communication and transparency. I'm excited to bring to the board a new additional procedure in which our school board directors, if passed, will be interacting with our district stakeholders. The directors want the opportunity to hear from our district's residents. We understand that we need to hear from everyone and be able to listen to their concerns and ideas if we want to be the best school district possible. This is a personal important issue to me due to how my concern was treated when I made a public comment about middle school grading a couple of years ago. My proposal is the following. The school board directors and district staff will conduct one listening session with stakeholders in each of the 3 zones per month. These listening sessions will last up to 1.5 hours each, and they will be conducted at rotating schools within our district. Each school in our district will host at least one listening session per year. At these listening sessions, there will be 2 school board members, the superintendent, and the school's principal. Comments, concerns will be given 8 minutes each so that a concern can be brought forward and there is some time to address it. If within the 8 minutes the concern question is not complete, a board member or staff member will follow up with the resident. The full rules for these listening sessions with stakeholders will be listed on the district site, as well as the schedule and locations for these events. I move for the board to vote on listening sessions with stakeholders to be implemented immediately.
I'd second that.
So the motion on the table, Dr. Morris, would you mind kind of just listing out your bullet points of, 1 in each school per year, 2 directors?
So the concept is 2 directors would be at each one, the superintendent or director level, hopefully the principal of the school. It would move around. There's 3 zones in our district. There would be 1 held in each of our zones each month. So it'd be 3 more opportunities where you could interact with the directors and the superintendent. One of the nice things about this in my mind is the idea that we're going to visit each of the schools within a year period. And so if travel or getting to where the school board is meeting, you can do that. One of the things that's really nice about this in comparison to now is we can actually get into conversations and discuss different concerns.
Thank you. Is there discussion on this topic?
Well, I'll go.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, thanks. The title is listening sessions. I want to emphasize the listening part of that. We don't, and we can't, and I realize there'll only be 2, so it wouldn't be a quorum, but we make decisions here as a body. And so, listening, I think, is the key point of that, and having the superintendent there is a key point of that discussion. So I don't want to oversell it. I don't think there should be too much heavy discussion on we're going to do X and Y. Because honestly, I'm okay with doing it, but I'm going to be very interested in what's said. I kind of want to know later on what is said at the ones I won't be at.
Yeah, and in conversation with the superintendent and I on this topic, we talked about scenarios of, someone's not happy with the size of their 3rd grade class. So the school board can't go in and change the size of that 3rd grade class. But we can remember when it comes to budget season, maybe we need to increase budgeting for 3rd grade education. We can talk with the superintendent about goals of lowering class size. So we work on a different level than operations. The operations is the superintendent and his cabinet and administration team.
One of the things I'm really interested in being able to do is follow up with questions, because there'll be sometimes the topic's brought up and we need more information. And in the current format, we can't actually speak to the person who's out there asking the questions. So we're going to be able to actually engage in a conversation after you get to tell us what you want. We can kind of ask about it, get some more information, and we can get a real dialogue going. Whereas right now it's really hard. If you're standing up there, you're probably just feeling like you're just yelling at us or talking at us, and we can't respond by rules. So we want to be able to respond and talk to you. So this is what I'm really excited that we get to do. We're going to have an hour and a half to do it. And I think it depends on how many people are there, we can always go back around and spend the time and have a good conversation.
Any further discussion?
Just openly ask the question, is a community. I've spent my whole life here, consider us one big family, and this may be a bit of an awkward public family conversation, and the goal is collectively to do the best we can for our kids, to create the best learning environment we can, to give kids the best opportunity we can together. And I'm hopeful that this format generates a dialogue where we all learn and we all can do better. I do that with some reservation, and that there's the other side of this is there's a conversation, and much of the conversation we've gotten to this point is what I would describe as wanting to litigate our decisions that we've made up until this point, and questions about transparency. So I'm all for talking with stakeholders, with the community, and improving the quality of what we do for our kids. And so I guess I'm ready to vote for the motion, but I'd like a follow-up conversation maybe about how we genuinely reset things and move forward as a community.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Morris. All right, we're going to move to E2. That's our superintendent search with our draft timeline. The superintendent and I have talked about this timeline, and it is a very aggressive timeline. This is to get someone in the seat that is well qualified, well diverse, and would be a great superintendent for the Greater Albany Public Schools. I want to express to the public and my fellow board members that this is a living document. We may fall behind, we may be able to work faster in some aspects. This is a living document. From time to time, modifications might need to be made. But I believe this is the right step for gaps, and I hope the public agrees, and that's one of the things we'll hear about in our upcoming listening sessions. Get back. So at this time, I'd like to hear a motion I'd like to hear a nomination of who would be, what two members would be on the superintendent search. I'd like to volunteer my name as one of the people to be on the superintendent search committee.
I'd like to do it.
Okay.
I would like to do it too. And I'll speak for myself, I'll speak on behalf of my motion. I have the time and the commitment to each of you to keep you informed of the process as we go on. I've also got a commitment to keeping this an open and the best and inclusive process that we can. And I learned a lot. I was part of, negotiated with Rob's company for the previous superintendent's contract. I learned a lot about what the world of superintendents are in this state. And I would like to bring all that knowledge to the table.
Just to be clear, was that a motion for yourself as a
For
nominee?
myself,
or was
yes,
it-
for myself,
okay.
yeah, and all the reasons why, yeah.
All right, and so we'll open up to a second.
Can I ask a process question?
Yes, sir.
We all, the community, everybody has a stake in this, so why is it two? Tell me how we got to a search committee of two. I mean, that's going to leave three out, I guess, of the most important thing we do, and none of the three, or the public who supports any of those three,
Sure.
probably going to be happy with that.
So this isn't necessarily just the people to be on it, but this is the people to lead it. So a leader and a backup. Yes, sir.
Just in looking at the document that's in front of you, you'll see a couple different things, a little bit of an aside and then to the point. You'll see that it is an aggressive timeline, and it lays out a bunch of steps to getting to the selection of the next superintendent, which is, very much the single most important thing that the board will have to do in a given year. Chris Green has done a really nice job of going through and looking at board policy and matching it up to the different steps to make sure that we follow policy every step of the way as we're going through in that search, and so it lays it out that way. One of the things you'll see is that at the next board meeting, it would be expected that there would be search consultant companies that would be brought back and interviewed for possible choosing that would help with the process. And the idea of this particular nomination or this particular vote would be that 2 members would help lead the process and do some of the work around gathering up who would those folks be, and just sort of be the point people as you move through this process. Clearly, the entire board and many others in the community will be involved in the process. And if you look at this, it lays out lots of community engagement as part of the process. So just wanted to be clear about that and what it is that we're looking for 2 people for.
This is a holistic process for the whole board, but a few individuals will assist you on more the day-to-day, but it will include the whole board during work sessions and meetings.
And help lead the search, yes.
Yes, sir. So hearing no second, the motion fails to issue the second.
I don't know if I'm good with that. I still don't know if I'm good with this process. Especially at this time.
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let me restate. I'm not comfortable with the selection of the 2 of 5 of us to lead what it is we do at this point. And I would, if we're stuck on that, I would need to think through that, and we can come back to that at the next meeting, I guess. And in the meantime, that would leave the chair and the vice chair as default for the next 2 weeks.
And we can definitely talk about it at the planning work session for it and do discovery. Does that work for administration, Mr. Superintendent? Is that okay?
Yeah, yes, I do think we have a motion on the floor, and so I think there needs to be a vote. I'm not clear exactly what the motion was. I think I heard.
I didn't make a motion.
Okay.
I think there were 2 offers of motions and then an actual motion. And so how about we just clean the slate here, and that there be, although I, thank you, that we withdraw motions to this point, and by consensus, I guess, that we put some thought into this personally, and that we dig deeper into format next time we meet. In the meantime, the default would be, if there's any decisions that have to be made, I guess, between now and when we meet again, it would be the chair and the vice chair. But I would prefer that we start at the beginning with some type of format that we all agree on. My goal would be that once we resolve this, however we resolve it, that all 5 of us agree to do it. And that's going to be hard when we're only choosing 2.
Do we have a consensus of we'll kind of work that way until?
Yeah.
For now, yeah.
So we have a consensus, and we'll follow up, and Director Neckers can submit some plans to the superintendent.
Whoa. That's not what I'm saying, but
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to E3. the reinstatement of policy CBB and administrative regulation CBB 8R, and that is what we suspended before when we needed to hire a interim superintendent, and we're putting this back in place for the hiring process of our permanent superintendent. So I'd hear a motion to reinstate policy CBB and administrative regulation CBB AR.
So moved as presented.
I second.
So moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to E4 is our Tahkeena Central, South Shore, and ESSER 3 funds discussion. As you've seen in your board packets, there are quite a few attachments to this. I believe the superintendent wanted to speak on some of these.
Chair Aganagwa, thank you very much. I wanted to talk a little bit about the question, or at least the discussion that would be before the board leading up to potential action in some later board meetings. So ESSER, E-S-S-E-R, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, has provided 3 pots of money to the district after the advent of COVID. The first was ESSER 1, then ESSER 2, and then ESSER 3. Lots of creativity in the use of that, in the naming of that. So the ESSER utilized ESSER 1 funds, which was approximately $1.9 million. Those came out early in the pandemic. And then the ESSER 2 funds were approximately $6.2 million to fund things like Chromebooks, masks, summer school programs, catch up for students, technology, hotspots, laptops for teachers, digital resources, AOP, program startup, nursing supplies, associated with the cost of providing schools in the pandemic and the quarantine stages of the pandemic. There are also a couple portables that were purchased with those funds. We now have roughly $15.7 million that have come to the district in ESSER 3 funds, and we have until 2024 to spend those funds. Our plan for their use is due to the Oregon Department of Education on October 20, 2021, so this coming October 20th. So the clock is ticking on this, but we have some time. And the spending plan is supposed to roughly follow our plan that was used for the student investment account, or SIA account, that the board did a lot of work on over the past year and a half or so previous, about how those funds would be spent. In your board packet, there's a sheet that will show you the proposed use of ESSER 3 funds. It provides detail about some of the different things that have been put forward on that. It's the very first document in your packet, and I'll just take a quick look at that. So it proposes summer school 23 for $300,000, a nurse for $82,346, custodial time to the tune of $82,346, and so on. I won't read through them all. But you can see that there are a couple pretty significant budgetary amounts, including 2 years of AOS, which is a 9 through 10 program, technology-wise, $750,000. RIM staffing, RIM supplies, Naviance, and so forth. And then near the bottom, there is a fairly sizable pot of money, which is prefab Tahkeena South Shore is what that stands for. And the dollar amount there is $10,175,000. And so you can see that the lion's share of those funds are lined up in that particular section. The project, so these are a couple of projects. The first project is for a prefab Tahkeena South Shore building space. And it includes a stick pre-built, prefabricated stud structure. It's a 50-year building, just to be clear. It's a nice building at Tahkeena Elementary, and it's intended to replace 4 sets of portables that are currently at Tahkeena. There are 2 classrooms in each portable, making 8 classrooms total at Tahkeena, and the prefab that is proposed would replace all 8 of those classrooms, so it would be for 8. The portables at Tahkeena have a 20-year expected lifespan, and they're now in their 30th year. Am I saying Tahkeena? I mean South Shore. I apologize, but I said that the whole way? Yep. South Shore. I'm sorry. 50-year building at South Shore. Elementary, which is intended to replace the 4 sets of portables at South Shore. Those portables at South Shore have a 20-year lifespan. They're in their 30th year and they're worn out. And the price tag for that is approximately $6.6 million. And there also is a sheet that you have that lays out the detail of those costs. And so we can look at that in just a second. The second project at Takina, really and truly, is actually less involved, but certainly trickier in the eyes of the public. The project would add 6 classrooms at Takina and finish the build-out of the school that was first planned when it was originally constructed. I think that was about 1968. And the cost of that project is about $4.1 million. There's a cost estimate sheet for that as well. This would give the district the opportunity to move all students to Takina from Central Elementary School. And the plan would be to keep Central as a district facility, but not as an elementary school. Instead, it would be used as office space and program space for things like the Welcome Center, REAP, and so on. We've previously talked about renting some commercial space for those kinds of programs, but we wouldn't need to do that were the district to pursue this plan. In June, the board had seemed prepared to take action to approve this plan and this use of ESSER 3 funds. Now, I do know that when this plan was originally put together, the dollar amount was smaller. It was in the $6.5 million range. I think further investigation about actual cost have obviously substantially driven that cost up to just over $10 million. With 3 new board members and the political nature of a new use for Central School, I thought it would be wise to bring this to the attention of the board for discussion, which is what this agenda item is about. And if there's a possibility the entire plan might move forward, it seemed public awareness and input would be extremely important, specifically really around all of that, the use of ESSER 3 funds, the idea of 8 new classrooms at South Shore. We'll get that right every time from now on, I hope. Thank you for the clarification or the correction. And then also for the idea that classrooms would go at Takina and South Shore, and Central would then be used as basically a de facto district office extension and for some district program. And so it seems like public awareness and input is really important, and that's why this agenda item has been put on this agenda and brought to you in this way. This is a discussion item for the board, and the staff will take directions for next steps based on your discussion and direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I'd be happy to take questions as well. Thank you.
Director Wilson.
So South Shore would be replacing the modulars that are there, and then Takina would be adding classrooms to accommodate Central's load.
Precisely correct.
Okay. I know that you and I discussed this in our one-on-one meeting, and I thought it was a great idea that you presented, and that is to have a meeting at Central to talk to those parents to tell them what's going on, because there'll be changes in their world. And then maybe we could take another meeting behind that at Takina to show them where their new facilities would be and what that would look like. And that might help for the people of Central to be okay with having their kids go to Takina. Does that make some sense?
Director Thompson?
Yeah, that does make sense. They already do. Takina and Central, Takina is K-1-2, Central is 3-4-5. It's the same kids, it's the same families. And it's only about 120, 130 at each. And so this community has been sitting, so there's about 120, 130 at Central right now, grades 3, 4, and 5. That's important because we talk about buildings, we have 20 buildings, we kind of assume, I don't know what that compares to, say, Oak Elementary or other elementaries. We can talk about buildings, but there's a fraction. There's a fraction of students in that building. And it's very inefficient. There's a lot of reasons, but it's very inefficient. That very old building, it's kind of funny, we just talked about, lifespans, the lifespans of the portables. Well, I don't know what the lifespan is of Central Elementary, but it's well over 100 right now. And the community's been kicking down the road what to do with it. I can go on and on. I've been active with Friends of Historic Albany. I'm a Central Tequina PTA. I've been a volunteer in that building. And it just is not the best. You know, we talk about doing the best for kids. The building has got a lot of issues, and maybe we can get down to that later. Maybe this is all saved for that discussion at Central. And I think you're right, but don't get me wrong. I'm just kind of going on what I've mulled over in my head. But it's the same. I just want to clear, Central Tequina are the same families. It's basically the same schools. It's just two buildings. And that is just very inefficient way to do things. And if the community wants to keep spending money to do that, then that's what we'll do. But I'll tell you, not only is it not a great building now, there are major things sitting there that are going to cost down the road or soon, and that's what it always has been. It's always been down the road another major thing, another major item. And if you just had lesser programs, lesser intense, if you had 5 adults in a room doing office work, the needs aren't as great as 25 kids in a classroom in the same bed. So
I just wanted to get the parents involved in the process so that
and
they
you will
feel
by both.
included in all this. And my dad went to Central back
We
a
have
long
lots of
time
people,
ago,
yeah.
so I'm familiar.
I have a lot of questions. The first one is, Superintendent Saxon, you said that it appeared that in June, the board was ready to approve this plan. I don't remember a public conversation about this prior, and maybe you've looked through minutes or records, but prior to tonight, I don't know that there's been a public conversation about this. So how's that work?
I know we talked briefly about South Shore quite a bit. And we talked very softly about adding rooms to Tequina. We didn't necessarily talk about
I think,
making
so if I can,
Central into a,
if I can, I think there was a timeline, there was a feeling of a time, and maybe with more clear viewpoint as the superintendent laid out, there is a timeline, there is some time crunch, but it's not, it can be done. It can be done within that timeline. I think there was a feeling that we had to get an approval. The biggest step on this was approving through the State Department of Education. And so I believe that was the crux to begin this. And you're right, it's South Shore. I don't want to get stuck on Central. South Shore is very much part of this. So I believe in June was get the ball rolling, and then we still would have been here with a public part of it.
So to be clear, up until tonight, there's been no public conversation by the GAPS board to close Central School.
There still isn't any discussion to close Central School. It would still be used. Currently, there's a like age 3 and 4 program from LBCC that happens in the basement. I believe that would happen. There are other district programs that could be put in there that could be school-like, but right, as a 3, 4, 5 school, no, that
To be clear, to close it as a grade school.
Yeah, I don't believe so. Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I was part of a group, and I don't know if it was 5, 6 years ago, who testified in a public hearing at the district office. Councilman Olson was one of those as well, who expressed concern about splitting both Tequina and Central, with kindergarten, 1st and 2nd going to one of those schools, 3rd, 4th, and 5th going to the other. At the time, I had 4 nieces who were girls who were going to be going to 2 different schools, lived close to Tequina. It made no sense to me.
Yeah.
Councilman Olson expressed the concern that this was step 1 to closing Central as a grade school. And everybody in attendance was assured that that was not the case. And so one of the things that we would need to come to terms with as an organization is what's the institutional integrity, and for how long is a board's word good, and when is that no longer good? I would be interested in if anybody's done a pro forma. Certainly there must be, on how much extra it costs to operate Central than other grade schools. I think the public would need to see those numbers. I think the community around Central would need to be completely engaged, and I'm most interested in what they have to say. I'm a bit frustrated that I asked on July 12th about South Shore when we voted to replace, we were putting modulars in other places. And there was no discussion or disclosure at that time about this plan. Because had there been for me, I would have moved South Shore to the front of the list. What I think the reference was, oh, there's a different plan coming. And I think that if I take half a step back, we would be making a substantial policy decision using these funds, this $15.7 million, for what in essence is a capital improvement. And I believe the intent and the highest and best use of that money today is to make sure our kids overcome the adverse impacts that they had through COVID, and establishing where we are in kids being to grade, where we're behind, and what the plan is to get kids caught up, and being confident that we can do that with the resources that are available before we talk about spending any of this money on capital improvements. We've talked about this issue before, and generally what I've gotten is these teachers will figure it out. I'd like to hear from them. I'd like to hear soon what we're finding in the first few weeks of school being open before we do any of this. And if it takes $15 million to mitigate the harm caused to students and families from COVID and get them back to grade level and create the bright future that we all want them to have, we should spend all $15.7 million doing it, if that's what it takes. Now, if it's something less than that, and there's money left to do capital improvements, that's a fair conversation. But I think this is a trailing conversation until we have that other conversation. And ultimately, if we need to do, it will be hard for me not, especially at South Shore, to do that. There are other ways we could figure out to do that. We could, for example, bond SDC charges or something like that if we need to. But if you haven't gathered it by now, I'm opposed to the proposition as it's being presented tonight.
Even, I'll let other people speak.
To me, one of the most important things for us to do is to get the kids back up to the level they need to be, and also make sure we have enough classrooms to, in my mind, lower the class size as much as we can. Right now, that's not something that's a legitimate conversation due to the fact that we're having hard times getting enough teachers to be in the classrooms already. But I would be hesitant to close a school.
I'll speak. Yeah, this really is and I would hate to separate the South Shore isn't. We talked about the need. Our construction excise tax fund is low, and that's why these things happen. That's why it always gets kicked down the road, because there's never enough money. The only time we build something really is when you have a bond, and there aren't going to be many bonds coming anytime soon. But the South Shore one, I think, would be a big mistake. The need is there so great, and it really is a class size issue. Buildings don't last forever, and I would just welcome you to come to Central. They got scrubbers for the ventilation right now, which are damn loud. You know, you talk about catching up. I'm talking about building that's just not. It's easy to say, well, it's a building, and we'll open the door and we'll send in there. It's not. You know, I want to see the numbers of what we're spending, if you want to keep it open to satisfy people, then let's be real about that we're just spending the money to feel good. We're just spending the money to make sure the door is open, I guess. And I say that as a parent of a Central student, as a volunteer at Central, as a member of the Friends of Historic Albany. I love the building. This isn't a discussion about closing the building or knocking it down. School buildings, we've got Fir Grove that is used for district things. We've got Fairmount. We've got Clover Ridge. School buildings need to be adaptable. And we need to be efficient, and we need to be smart with our money, and this is an opportunity to do that and to get new classes that, part of COVID is being able to space out, and you need building space to space out. And this may not be the only time in our history that we have a virus like this. And so this is about the future as much as anything. But anyway, yes, I would say, before we kick, I would love to have discussions at Central, Takina, one or the both. I think that's the way to go.
Thank you. Ms. Bronza?
I just want to say, here, let me make sure people can listen to me. I went to South Shore. That was my elementary school, kindergarten through 5th, and I just need to point out, the work they're doing there. That school is the reason I can speak English. I wasn't Spanish was my first language. They helped me a lot, and I feel like not to put any blame anywhere, because you guys are doing an amazing job, but South Shore isn't as, I guess, greatly viewed. I switched from South Shore to Timber Ridge, and I guess that switch for me at least was, it's hard when you live in a low income, because that's what South Shore mostly is right now, is a lower income area. Community is amazing. I'd like to point out that I would not trade that community over for anything. It was amazing growing up to there. But I remember those portable pods. I would fall because they're terrible right at the state they're at right now. It wasn't a great feeling going from South Shore to a school like Timber Ridge, seeing those class sizes, seeing those the type of school that they have, and it's an amazing school. I'm not putting any hate out there. I'm just pointing out that obvious and that feeling for me at least. So I just feel like pushing that idea away right now isn't the best for those students at South Shore. I'm clearly not the best at finance and all this money stuff, but that's my feeling as a student from South Shore at least, was they're an amazing program, amazing work they're doing there. I just feel like they need a little more love, and that's it.
Superintendent Saxton, of the three options, almost all of them get new buildings for South Shore, correct?
Well, actually, I think, the board has kind of an infinite number of options here, but I can name three very quickly.
Okay.
One would be that the $15.7 million, you wouldn't do any building, and that you would use the dollars for student and student recovery and other kinds of programs that maybe are directly attributable to learning loss around COVID. The second would be that you would do one of the two projects. You could do just the South Shore project, or you could do just the Takina project, or you could do both. Those seem like logical options to me as the board talks about this. And again, this isn't for a vote tonight. It's around discussion and trying to get some guidance about how you all would like to proceed.
For me to be clear, I'm committed to solving the issues at South Shore. As I said, I was surprised and disappointed on July 12th, as I now look in the rearview mirror, that I would have moved that first on the list and immediately. And there must be, we've not yet gotten through a budget cycle, but there must be ways to find and fund $6 million. You could bond the You could bond the SDC charges. I don't know what they bring in annually, but dedicate it specifically to that. But I guess Superintendent Saxon, tell me at what point the district will have a handle on just what the needs are in the way of getting kids caught up to grade.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't pick up on exactly what you said, so we were translating over here, my apologies. We do have plans in place around some work to be done around trying to get students back up to their as if COVID hadn't happened, right? There's some intentionality around what we would call MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, to ramp up learning for kids. Certainly, resources and additional programming help with that, right? But we recognize that there's some learning loss, and we have used some of the ESSER funds in order to try to ramp that up. It's really hard for me to do a calculus that says, this precisely gets us to where we needed to be with kids and where they have been previously, or above where they've been previously, which would be the ultimate goal. And so it's difficult for me to say there's a precise calculus around that. Certainly, resources can help with that, but we do have plans in place in order to try to make that happen. The thought that we wouldn't, try to make that happen wouldn't be acceptable.
Right, thank you.
So it sounds like there's a couple things on the table. We need to know, sounds like there's a couple things on the table. We need to know education loss level and how we're combating that. And then the second is, I would strongly recommend sending a survey out to Keena Central parents, asking for their input so we can get that, the input for which way this pendulum is going to swing.
Okay.
I think the board is interested in hearing, how many third graders are reading at a second grade level or a first grade level. We're worried about spending money on what I would call a bond project. Because, how often does the state give us millions of dollars for construction, right? We want to know if we got to play catch up before we can spend money on capital improvement.
And I think we do have some third grade reading scores that we can try to produce and see if we can, get those to you so that you all have an idea of where we sit with that.
Thank you, sir. So there's no action required on this tonight, I don't see. If you have future questions, I know our superintendent would be happy to answer them, and we will be discussing this in our next board meeting.
So I would ask this, is that when we come back, and I think we're 2 weeks, a projection of those SDC funds we're receiving and whether or not the South Shore project is a bondable project through those funds, and that we not hold that project up while we're having the bigger conversation, because it needs to get done.
So we can just, in the future, we'll talk about these two projects separately, and that'll help. Because I think we do have a consensus on South Shore.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, we're going to move to item F. Mr. Superintendent.
Oh, I'm just getting to go here. Let's see here. It was the first week of school this last week, and so I do have a few things to share. I think the most important message I have for you is that we had a successful start on Tuesday the 7th. Kids are in school with educators and learning's underway. I had the opportunity to visit about 10 schools on the first day of school, and everyone was super excited. It was really apparent that people were both excited and nervous, students and staff, but within about an hour, that nervousness, it seemed like, had largely disappeared into happiness about being back. In multiple settings, I saw staff ask students to raise their hand if they were nervous in the very beginning of classes, at the beginning of the day, and you'd see lots of kids raise their hand. It had been a while, and there's concerns about mask wearing and COVID and so forth. And then just an hour or two later, I'd hear the same question asked, and almost no hands at all would go up, which was really interesting to see. And they seemed to be settling in. During the week, I was able to visit 15 of our schools, and things were running smoothly. I probably had the chance to meet about 200 educators during my visits over the course of that time, and they were all positive and upbeat, and I actually really enjoyed myself. Lots of thanks to the quality professional educators that we have in the district and the hard work and dedication that they put into making that all happen. I think perhaps my biggest setback during the visits was when one of our fourth graders seemed really excited when I walked into the classroom, and he wanted to know if I was Joe Biden. I told him that Joe was a lot older than me, but it didn't seem to, somehow that age difference just sort of didn't seem to compute for him, and so I guess I should have, just said I was the president. The board should know I was really impressed with the district facilities and the incredible work that's been done with the last bond, Meadow Ridge Elementary, South Albany, West Albany, and other buildings. Just truly beautiful, impressive, quality learning spaces, and the community of Albany has a lot to be proud of when it comes to that. Last thing about these visits, I was in the kitchen, which is one of our 2 production kitchens at South Albany High School, and it gave me a glimpse, and it's a glimpse I've had before in other positions, but it just reminded me of the absolute size and scope of the enterprise that we have underway that we call schools in Albany and the educating of students. Food service and the amount of food and number of meals that we prepare and move every day and serve each day. Transportation, the number of miles that we drive, the maintenance of the vehicles each day, the maintenance of the facilities that we keep up and running. Got to see the 4-pipe HVAC system at South Albany. A lot of people don't get excited about 4-pipe systems, but I've seen 2-pipe, and I know how much better it works, and I get excited about that. The custodial staff, business office, curriculum and instruction, administrators and teachers, all choreographed so that learning takes place in the classroom, and it's really just something to behold and something that everybody has a lot to be proud of. I think right now we're doing it all in the middle of a pandemic with a bunch of health and safety protocols in place that we haven't traditionally had to deal with. Over the 3 days that I visited school, I only had to ask one person to put on a mask. We know that wearing a mask isn't fun, but we want to stay with in-person instruction, and a mask helps to reduce the spread of COVID and allow us to reduce the number of quarantined students and staff if someone comes into contact with a person who has COVID while they're at school. I want to talk too about enrollment numbers because they are important to our budget, and that's something that we were able to take a look at this last week. We based our budget on an expected enrollment of 9,200 students, but we balanced our budget on an expected enrollment of 8,800 students. Those are 2 really different things, and they're important concepts to understand. Right? We think we'll get 9,200, but we built our budget on 8,800. So on Friday last week, our enrollment was 9,126. And given those numbers, we should be in good shape with our budget. There's a little bit of funkiness to that over this year because, and last year, because all districts in the state are going to have a hard time counting kids and enrollment growth over the past 2 years because some students didn't go to school last year like they had previously. And so the exact amounts that these dollars mean for us depends on what happens in other districts and how many kids show up. The state school fund is always the total amount, the numerator, divided by how many students there are in the state, the denominator, and that's how much you get per student. And so until we know how many kids enrolled in all schools across the state, the exact numbers are still left to be determined. But again, the takeaway is we should be in good shape. I want to thank all the groups who've met with me over the past couple of weeks since I started. I think this is my 16th day, and for the time they've spent bringing me up to speed on everything. Chris Green has been absolutely invaluable, and I want the board and community to know that. So have principals, district office staff, and district leaders. Lisa, Javier, Doug, Heather, Sue Luthra have been patient and invaluable. So has Nurse Rachel. Also, I just want to tell them thank you. Community partners have been too. Since I've been here, I've been able to meet with the Albany Boys and Girls Club, ASAP, the Albany Student Advocacy Project, Superintendent's Advisory Council, Police Department, especially want to say thank you to our chief, the YMCA, the fire department, also especially to the chief, Albany Public Schools Foundation, United Way, school principals, school staff, our association leaders, both teachers, both our licensed and our classified, presidents, and our UNISERV representative. And finally, I want to say thank you to the superintendent colleagues that I've been invited to a weekly call with the superintendents of Oregon's 7 biggest districts. We're not the 8th biggest district, but they've afforded me the opportunity to learn quickly from them over the last couple of years when I've been goofing off on retirement. And they've really helped to bring me up to speed. And so that's been a wealth of information. I just want to publicly thank those folks too. That's a lot, but also last week was a really busy week, and I think giving you an update on my activities and what's happening in the district is important. I'd be happy to answer questions or take comment.
Thank you, sir. Is there any action on F2? I see the item on there, but there's no attachment or no name. And Director Thompson might mention that in his board report.
Yeah,
F2.
no, it's not ready to.
Go ahead, excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to mention during my board time that we met and went through finished up section J, but I don't think it'd be ready to come to you just yet. So that's kind of a placeholder.
And if I could, Chair Agnago, I do have a couple of things on F2, and I'm probably talking too much, but I'll try to be brief. I wanted the board to be aware that there are sort of 3 avenues by which policy comes before the board and by which policy gets reviewed in the district. The first avenue is a full review of district policy, and it's probably been 15 or 20 years since Greater Albany Public Schools has done a full policy review. That's underway now. It's been underway since last January, and it's probably going to take another year or so to complete. Maybe a little less, but just to be safe. And that comes in big packets. It's reviewed by a committee. It comes in large doses to the board. It's reviewed by the board, recommended by the committee, and you have an opportunity to act with those policies as they come before you. So that's part 1. Part 2 is a periodic legal review. So every time the legislature comes into session, there are new laws that are passed, and sometimes they impact policy. The Oregon School Boards Association goes over that policy, makes adjustment for new law, and if there's changes to specific policies, then they come before the board. That's another avenue. And the third avenue would be a desire by the board to make a change in a specific policy. If there was something that happened in the district and afterwards we looked at our policy and said that didn't really meet our needs, a board member could say, I'd like to review that policy. I think it's important to get legal and or OSBA advice on that policy as it comes forward, and then to have some recommendations from administration, debate by the board, and then a change or just keeping the policy as it is. So those are 3 different ways that policy can come before the board, and having you sort of understand those 3 different ways I think is important to the work that you do. You get to adopt policy. That's your work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's going to bring us to G1, liaison reports. Board members?
I'll do one.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to do 2 of the ones I am a liaison for. The Albany Police Department, the Welcome Back School event went very well. A selection committee just recently selected the first police officer to return as the school resource officer to our district. It's Officer Curtis Bell. This has been a slower process to start up again due to COVID and Police Academy being intermittently closed. I'd also like to talk about the Boys and Girls Club. Club's membership capacity for the year was filled in the first 30 minutes available online. So there was a lot of demand there, and they had to turn some people away. Unfortunately, the club is unable to find all the after-school staff needed to support their after-school programs at full capacity. Currently, the club only has 12 of 31 positions filled, resulting in the club limiting the after-school program to 175, vice the normal capacity of 500 students. They're having some problems, and it's unfortunate because they've been a big contributor to our youth. The club's and the district's goal is to open an after-school satellite program site at Waverly starting in January. However, if staffing is not available, we're just not going to be able to meet this goal. So obviously the Boys and Girls Club needs to meet their staffing for their, their own facility before they'd branch out. We'd sure love to do a satellite program at Waverly. The status of that, I don't know. That's all I have.
Director Thompson?
No, just the policy review committee met and worked through section J, which you'll see later.
Thank you. Director Wilson?
I have no report this time.
Director Nyquist?
I have no report at this time.
I know some of our community partners, like the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, and CAPS, are all kind of hurting for staff right now, but they're trying to do the best of what they have, of what they can, and hopefully we can get our kids back into those programs soon. G2 is board member reports,
I don't have it.
and G3 is, do you have something, sir?
I do. I do want to congratulate the community, the students, their parents, all of the GAPS employees that are the team, and the greater community at large for getting back to full-time school in some pretty challenging conditions. COVID numbers in our community are not at a place where any of us should be comfortable, yet folks have persevered, and it's good to see kids back in school. It's good, and all of the things family-wise that come from that. And I know it's been a while for kids, and I doubt that any of them are sitting here listening to me, but if I have one message, it's be nice to each other. I know you're enthused about being back, and really don't want to get very far into this year with bullying or racial slurs or anything of that nature where people may be attempting to be funny and it's not. So be nice to each other, be safe, be careful, follow the Safe Schools guidance. Very concerned about the impact to families of kids being quarantined when they don't plan for that, especially at the grade school level. So anything we can do as a community to mitigate that, and everything we can do inside the schools to try to minimize those are important. And it sounds to me like we're doing a great job in that regard. Just well done.
Thank you, sir. G3 is Esperanza.
Okay. The first thing I would like to start off with is an amazing thank you to our classified and certified staff working in unison on helping our students find classrooms, greeting students, and stepping out of their classroom. I know it's been difficult to get used to a sense of normalcy, but I think we're doing an amazing job at doing so. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Rose, I'm sorry if I butcher this, Zolmer, yeah? And her RISE students on freshman days. Rose organized these community serving students and showed true leadership. I was a part of this, and I just want to point out how amazing it was to just see these students who really didn't have a normal year since like 6th or 7th grade step onto a high school and not know anything that's going on and see their frightened faces, but I think it'll be okay. But I just thought it was an amazing opportunity to be a part of. And a thank you to Kelly Belcastro and her custodial staff for juggling and moving desks and other and other classroom items to meet our students' needs. I don't think the custodial staff gets enough appreciation for what they're doing, especially with our lunches being outside right now. I think they're doing a lot more than we give them thank you for. So thank you guys. And shout out to our counselors and office staff who had a very busy week adjusting schedules, organizing essential school documents, especially with our locker jams. That was an interesting time. And it was just, especially with 2 of our counselors being semi-new, I know it was difficult for you guys, so thank you. And a huge appreciation for our high school sports programs. And we had a football game last Friday night. I don't know how many people came, but it was amazing to see the turnout and the community come together for that game. My assistant principal, Miss Ayers, said the football crowd at Friday's home game versus North Salem was the biggest in her recent memory. The student section was amazing, and for that I would also like to say, I know I'm giving a lot of thank yous, but these are two students. A big thank you to Peyton Davis and Ryan Tapana. They are our ASB Spirit officers, and they did an amazing job at riling up the student section, making sure people were wearing their masks, the same as Miss Ayers. It was also great to see the students not having as much of a problem with masks, especially with it being not like an inside school event. Like some students were worried with other students not wearing their masks because it wasn't, yeah. So I just want to say thank you to you guys. You created such a welcoming environment and such school spirit during this time. It's giving us such a sense of normalcy. And another thing that I would like to, I guess, present, was already spoken about in the public comment, is bringing the nurse on to talk, because I have so many questions about community events that we can do and other stuff that the students are really looking forward to, but it's hard, I guess, for you guys to know what's really going on, because the nurse she has more of a sense of what's going on with like being able to have dances and being able to have events at our schools. So it'd be a lot, I guess, comforting to be able to talk to her about those types of stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moves us to item I, is our consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull out? Okay, with that, we are going to move forward to item J, old business. I do not see.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
might we vote to approve the consent agenda?
Yeah?
I would move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
The consent agenda has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Madam Assistant Superintendent, item K1, please.
So I'd like to introduce or ask to come up Dr. Krista McGuire. She is our Special Programs Director who will just present the Restraint and Seclusion report to the board.
All right, good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. So I'm Krista McGuire. I am the Director of Special Programs, and I am here to discuss the Restraint and Seclusion report. So we are required to present this to the school board annually. You have a copy of the report in your board packet. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. The numbers obviously look significantly different this last year than they would have the previous couple of years. So I did include the last 3 years worth of data so you could see what more of a full year would look like. I would like to point out that we did have a lot of our students in school last year in our specialized programs. And so even though the full student body wasn't in person, our specialized programs were running limited in-person instruction for the majority of the year. And as you'll see from the 3-year look at the data, we have been trending downward, so hopefully that will continue. And then finally, I just want to note in the demographics that in our district, males and students on IEPs and students with lower socioeconomic status are more likely to experience restraint and seclusion. So I think that's important to consider when looking at the demographic data. So I would answer any questions if you have any.
Go ahead, sir. No?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Glance at it to make sure, but thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Mr. Pittman, is there any bond update?
None this time.
Thank you. And we're going to move to M. The organizational.
One, you have organizational is basically a housekeeping item. Obviously, we have an interim superintendent and an interim me that needs to be added to this document. So those two main changes are Rob Saxton as Chief Administrative Officer and Clerk, and then adding the me as the Interim Executive Director of Operations for the purpose of affixing 2 signatures. And the staff is looking for a motion to approve the updated 2021 organizational resolution.
So moved as presented.
I second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the updated 2021-22 organizational resolution. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And it looks like the rest of our board agenda is informational only. And I'll ask the board or the superintendent if they have any further. All right, I will call us to adjourn at 8:18 p.m. Thank you.
All right.